January 27th, Saint John Chrysostom, Archbishop of Constantinople and Doctor of the Church. Saint John, surnamed Chrysostom, or the Golden-Mouthed, from his extraordinary eloquence, was born at Antioch in Syria about AD 344. He was brought up by his widowed mother under the ablest masters, and astonished everyone by his wonderful progress in eloquence and philosophy. At the same time, he laid a solid foundation of virtue by the practice of true humility and generous self-denial. Though naturally impetuous, he had by daily victories over himself extinguished all motions of passion in his breast. His modesty, meekness, charity, and amiable manners rendered him the delight of all that knew him. After the completion of his studies, he spent some time in pleading at the bar, and was insensibly drawn by his associates into various worldly diversions, especially the entertainments of the stage, which he soon perceived to be attended with extreme peril to his soul. Struck with horror at the sight of the precipice on the brink of which he stood, he abandoned his worldly career and embraced a mortified and penitential life. Clothed in coarse garments, he fasted daily, slept on the hard floor, and spent his time in prayer and the study of the Holy Scriptures. Saint Meletius, Bishop of Antioch, admiring his fervor, ordained him lector, and for 3 years he resided in the bishop's house occupied in his studies. At the end of that time, urged on by his desire of attaining perfection, he quitted the city and retired to the mountains, where he joined the company of certain anchorites who followed a mode of life similar to that of the Egyptian solitaries. After 7 years spent in the continual exercise of prayer and the most severe austerities, his feeble health compelled him to return to the city, where Saint Meletius received him with open arms and ordained him deacon. After the death of the bishop, John was raised to the priesthood by his successor, who committed to him the preaching of the divine word, an office which he discharged with such eminent success that the whole face of the city was shortly changed. After 12 years spent in the service of the Church of Antioch, John was removed to a still more important field of labor, namely, the city of Constantinople, of which he was consecrated archbishop. Here he distinguished himself by his universal zeal in the instruction of the faithful, the maintenance of sound doctrine, the relief of the poor, and the reformation of the grievous abuses which prevailed in that luxurious city. He particularly directed his efforts towards the abolition of the licentious games, from which his own virtue had formerly been exposed to peril. His independence of character and apostolic freedom of speech made him many enemies, and he became especially obnoxious to the Empress Eudoxia, who applied to herself the invectives which he pronounced against the vices and follies of the age. She accordingly procured the assemblage of a mock council at Chalcedon, composed of 36 bishops who, being themselves ill-disposed towards Chrysostom, and eager to gratify their royal mistress, pronounced against him a sentence of deposition. Thereupon, the weak Emperor Arcadius was prevailed upon by Eudoxia to sign an order for his banishment, and he was hurried away secretly into exile. But upon the night following his departure, the city was shaken by an earthquake which so alarmed the empress that she immediately dispatched messengers to recall him. Upon his return to Constantinople, he was received with extraordinary joy by the inhabitants, who went out to meet him and conducted him in procession with lighted torches to the church, where he was accustomed to address them. The tranquility thus established was not of long continuance. Upon the occasion of the erection of a silver statue of the Empress opposite the great church of St. Sophia, public games were celebrated on the spot, which, besides disturbing the sacred services, were the occasion of criminal excesses. Fearing lest his silence might be construed as the approval of an abuse against which he had so often protested, the holy bishop denounced these entertainments with his usual freedom. This was represented to the empress by his enemies as a personal insult to herself, whereupon, to appease her wounded vanity, she obtained by her intrigues a fresh decree of deposition against Chrysostom. Summoned by the emperor to withdraw from the city, the saint refused to abandon the flock committed to his care by God, and appealed to Pope Saint Innocent I, who warmly took up his cause. But the jealousy of the revengeful Eudoxia frustrated all his efforts, and the bishop was again sent into banishment. Shortly after he left the city, a terrible fire broke out, which destroyed several of the principal buildings, along with some of the most precious objects of antiquity, and, a few months later, the persecuting empress perished in childbed. Meanwhile, the fury of his enemies had allowed the saint no respite. Upon his arrival at Nice in Bithynia, he was hurried thence by orders of Eudoxia to Caucasus, a miserable town of Armenia, situated among the deserts of Mount Taurus. During the journey, the holy bishop underwent incredible hardships, being often deprived of the necessaries of life, and forced to travel during the greater part of the night while suffering from a burning fever. After a journey of 70 days, he arrived at his place of exile, where he was received with great reverence by the worthy bishop. Here he remained for 3 years, still employing himself in the service of the Church by his learned writings and unceasing efforts for the conversion of the neighboring nations. While the whole of Christendom was united in honoring and defending this valiant champion of the Church, his implacable enemies, whose fury still pursued him, obtained an order for his removal to Pityus, a town situated among the most barbarous tribes on the shores of the Black Sea. 2 officers were appointed to convey him thither over rough roads in a limited number of days, with a promise of promotion if by hard usage he should die in their hands. They often traveled under a scorching sun, from which his head, which was bald, suffered exceedingly. At other times they obliged him to proceed amid torrents of rain, which drenched him from head to foot. On their arrival at a certain town in Cappadocia, he was very ill, but they hurried him 5 or 6 miles further to a little chapel in which lay the relics of Saint Basiliscus. During the night the holy martyr appeared to him and said, "Be of good courage, Brother John. Tomorrow we shall be together." The saint, overjoyed at the news, begged his guards to allow him to remain a few hours at the oratory, but met with a rough refusal. However, after they had gone a short distance, they were compelled to bring him back in a dying condition. Upon his arrival at the oratory, he arrayed himself in his best garments, which were all white, and received the Holy Sacrament with great devotion, finishing his prayer with his usual doxology, "Glory be to God for all things." Having added Amen, and signed himself with the sign of the cross, he sweetly gave up his soul to God in AD 407, at the age of 63. St. John Chrysostom was low of stature, and his mortified countenance bespoke the austerity of his life. Though a prey to continual infirmities, his labors were incessant. When not engaged in preaching or other active duties, he was always busy with his pen, and he has left behind him numerous works full of profound learning, and breathing everywhere sentiments of the most tender piety. Hence he is justly regarded as one of the most illustrious of the doctors of the Church.